Hi everybody, welcome to Dulcimerica. My name is Bing Futch, and today we are going to continue our journey looking into music theory for the mountain dulcimer, as we've been doing all during the year so far. Thank you very much for joining me. We've been talking about how to take these different elements of music theory and bind them together so we can really understand the mountain dulcimer a bit better. And we had scales, and out of scales we began looking at the scale degrees and how to build chords off of each one of those. And if you're coming into this just now, I recommend going back a few episodes to the beginning of 2019 to take a look at what we've covered so far. Because today, we're going to start looking at how to form these chords again using the different notes of the scale, and also how to change the voices of these chords to suit our needs. But first, I want to give a big shout out to one of my patrons on Patreon, Midge Shawley. Midge, thank you very much for pledging, and to all of my patrons, thank you very much for being a part of my art every single day. You know, besides the obvious stuff of having the time to put together books and videos and do the research and create lesson plans for teaching at workshops, there are other little things that happen every single day, like the amount of data that has to be stored for a Dulcimerica episode, or just to make sure that all of these things, the keyboards and the dulcimers and the accessories and the software and the hardware, is all working together to make it possible for me to produce episodes of Dulcimerica, as well as other things to help you learn more about the mountain dulcimer, ukulele, and Native American flute. These costs are basically taken over by patrons just simply by paying $5 a month, and that $5 in return gets you all kinds of stuff. From the past, you get all of my books, CDs, videos, and tablature. And going into the future and coming from the present, everything I produce now is yours as well, free to download. So if you're interested, you can go right on down here to patreon.com/bingfutch. Check out the featured tag section, click on open house, and all of that is yours just to try before you buy. And if you're interested, please do think about signing up and becoming a patron like Midge Shawley. Again, Midge, thank you very much. And to all of my patrons, I love you. I love you guys. Okay, we're going to dig down deep now into one last thing before we start moving these chords around a whole bunch. And what we're going to be looking at here is how to build chords off of the scale degrees, knowing the roots, knowing the thirds, and knowing the perfect fifths. So to prepare for this, the first thing I want to do is I want to show you how to play every single note in your first octave and how to recognize every single note as well. So I'm tuned in D-A-D, that's D on the bass string, A on the middle string, and D above the octave on the melody string. That's a 1-5-8 tuning. Remember we talked about scale degrees, how every single 7-note or diatonic scale has a number associated with it. The numbers I'm giving you right now are the numbers for the strings, 1, 5, and 8. So if we want it to be in the key of D, we've got our 1 chord, or our 1 note, which is going to be D in this case. And so that's going to be our bass string, that's 1. So the 5 is going to be a fifth, an interval of a fifth above that D, and we know that to be A. So there's A in the middle string, and then 8 is the octave. Remember, there are 7 notes in the scale, but that 8th note is an octave above the root where we started. Since we started with D, we now have an octave on the melody string, and that is 8 notes above where we started. So we have root, we have fifth, and we have octave. So starting from here, what we're going to look at, first of all, is the D major scale. We'll do that up the melody string. That's going to use frets 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.5, and 7. And of course, we play open to start. So once you locate that, then we go back over it and we add in the notes of the scale, starting with D, E, F sharp, G, A, B, C sharp, and D. Then we can do the exact same thing on the bass string. D, E, F sharp, G, A, B, C sharp, and D. And once again, the key of D has 2 sharps, F sharp and C sharp. Now we're going to go up that middle string. Our open string there is A, so they'll be doing an A major scale here. A has 3 sharps, F sharp, C sharp, and G sharp added to that. So remember, you just want to go through the 7 letters of the alphabet. When you get to G, you'll wrap back around again and go to A. So we start here with A, B, C sharp, D, E, F sharp, G sharp, A. And notice that I use the exact same frets that I did playing on the bass string and on the melody string, because our frets are set up exactly the same way for both of those string courses, all three of those string courses. So we'll be landing in the same place for the same type of scale, in this case, the major scale. Now we're going to start going across the strings on the bass string and on the middle string. To play D, we're going to go on the bass string, open 1, 2, 3 on the bass string, and then open 1, 2, 3 on the middle string to do this. Again, our notes are D, E, F sharp, G, A, B, C sharp, D. Next we go to G major. We haven't covered that yet on this episode. That's got 1 sharp, simply F sharp starting from the 3rd fret on the bass string. We'll play 3, 4, 5, 6 on the bass string, 3, 4, 5, 6 on the middle string like this. G, remember we'll start over from the beginning of the alphabet whenever we hit G. A, B, C, then to the middle string, D, E, F sharp, and G. Finally, we do the A major scale starting from the 4th fret. A major once again has 3 sharps, F sharp, C sharp, and G sharp. From the 4th fret, A, B, C sharp, D, to the middle string, E, F sharp, G sharp, and A. So for A, we are skipping over the 6th fret. We're playing 4, 5, 6.5, 7, 4, 5, 6.5, 7. Not using the 6th fret because the 6th fret has got natural notes for C and G, and in the case of A, we want that to be C sharp and G sharp. What we've done, though, is we have named every single note in the 1st octave. If you have the 1.5 fret, we haven't tackled those, but we've touched on every other note in the 1st octave, which ends at the 7th fret and begins with the open. If you have the 1.5 fret, you've got F natural on the bass string and on the melody string, and you have a C natural on the middle string right there at the 1.5 fret. But if you don't have a 1.5 fret, it's going to look like that, and I'm not sure of the actual percentages, but it seems to me that more people don't have the 1.5 fret than actually do have the 1.5 fret. That's slowly changing. And there's a good reason to have that fret, to have an additional couple of half-step possibilities for you in the scale. So if you do have the 1.5 fret, just remember that you've got C and F at the 1.5 fret. That accounts for all the notes now in the 1st octave. So what you can do to memorize all the notes in their location when you're in this particular tuning, DAD, is to practice those scales and do them as slowly as you need to. Don't even worry about having to rush through them. Even if you have to have a reference sheet out that shows you where all the notes are located, that's completely fine. As long as you kind of keep going through and naming those notes, because what will happen eventually is you'll look down, and instead of having to count up or backwards, up and down the fretboard, you can simply zero in on where you're at and say, that's a D right there at the 3rd fret on the middle string. Or that's an F sharp on the melody string at the 2nd fret. When you get to that point, then you can move on to this point here, where we're starting to build chords built off of these scale degrees. And we can do that without having to memorize every single chord possibility on the fretboard. So how do we do that? We take a look at our 3 chord shapes that we're using most of the time when we're playing in DAD tuning. Those are the L shape, the slant shape, and the extended slant. The L shape looks like an L, although it's kind of backwards if you look at it straight down. It's upside down and backwards. It's kind of like a backwards 7. I'm just confusing the matter. Anyway, you can kind of see where this would be the trunk of the L, and then the foot of the L goes across the 3rd fret there. So that's an L shape. Typically, I bar with the L shape, meaning I press down on all the strings all the way across that particular fret. And then you come up 2 frets and lay a thumb down on the melody string. This is great for changing chords and then being able to work the melody. But that is our basic L shape right there. The slant shape looks like tic-tac-toe in a diagonal. It's all the frets in a row, and we're just going to do a diagonal across like that. That is the slant shape. The extended slant shape takes this note that's closest to the bridge and moves it one more fret up. So we start with the slant, and then we extend that slant on the melody string, and that's our shape for the extended slant. Standing in a class of its own would be the bar, and that once again is just going to be all the way across one fret and pressing down every single string, and that comes in handy for a lot of stuff. Let's go back to our L-shaped chord. Now, if you remember the past couple of episodes, we've been talking about how to build major and minor chords. If you haven't gone through that or don't know how to do this, go ahead back a couple of episodes, check that out, and then come on back. Major chord is going to be a root, a third, and a fifth, or the first note of the scale, the third note of the scale, and the fifth note of the scale. So we're going to do a G major chord here, and the L shape is going to take care of everything. The root of the chord with this L shape is going to be on the bass string. So that's G right there. The third of the chord is going to be on the melody string. We have B right here at the fifth fret. And then we've got the perfect fifth of the scale. That's going to be on the middle string, in this case right next to the root, and that is D. G, B, and D. And we're doing a G major chord. The first, third, and fifth notes of the G major scale are G, B, and D. So we've got our G major chord here. Now what's nice about this is that you can move this form all over the fretboard, and as long as you know what root you're playing and you keep that shape, you'll be able to play. Now, because we have a diatonic fretboard, which means that we're not fully chromatic, and we've got a combination of whole steps, the wide spaces in between frets, and half steps, the narrow spaces in between frets, that means that this L-shaped chord, when separated by an empty fret in between your bar and where your thumb is located, sometimes you'll get a major chord, and sometimes you'll get a minor chord. There are 3 major chords and 3 minor chords in every key, and you can get them all using the L shape. So if I move this 3, 3, 5 chord, those are the numbers of the frets coming from bass string to the melody string. If I move that down to 1, 1, 3, the first thing you may notice is that the quality of the chord sound has changed. It's gone from being a major chord, up and happy, to a minor chord, kind of sad and serious. So the first thing we do here is we go, okay, if we don't know what that position is, look at the root. That's going to be the bass string. What note are we playing there? Well, looking at our scale from the open on D, bass string, E is the second note of the scale, and that's where our root is located for this L-shaped chord. That means that we've got an E chord here of some sort. The other thing is to listen now to the quality of the chord, and if it's an up and happy chord, this would have been called E major. But this is a kind of serious chord, so we're going to call that E minor. Now, even though we're keeping the same shape, we still have the ingredients necessary to play this chord: the root, the third, and the fifth, but not just any third, because we're playing a minor chord. This is a minor third that we're playing here. The notes are E, G, and B for E minor. If this were an E major chord, that G would actually be a G sharp. And we can actually play an E major on the mountain dulcimer. We can go 7, 6.5, 5. You got E on the bass string here, G sharp on the middle string, and B on the melody string. In the middle is our G sharp, that's our major third. If I bring that G sharp down a half step to the 6th fret, I'm now playing G natural, and now we have an E minor chord. Listen to that E minor compared to this E minor. It's the same chord for certain, but it sounds a little bit different inside. Why is that? We're still using E, G, and B. What we're not doing is staying consistent with the pitches of each of those notes. In this case, the highest note in the scale is B. E is the lowest note, G sharp is in the middle note, and B is the highest note, the highest pitched note in that E major chord. Even if I bring the G sharp back down to G natural for the E minor, B is still the note that is the highest pitch. It's higher in pitch than lower in pitch. So now if I go down here to this 1-1-3 chord, the highest note pitch-wise is actually G on the melody string, and the B is the middle pitch, and once again E is the lowest note in the chord. So when we change the pitches of a note, we don't change the notes themselves in a chord, but we do change how high or how low those notes are. We're changing the voicing of the chord, and that makes it sound a little bit different, and that can be very much handy when you're doing your own arrangements or trying to learn pieces of music. So that L-shaped chord can be major or minor as you move it up and down the fretboard. Just figure out what the bass note is, what the root is, and then figure out if it's major or minor, and you have the name of your chord. Very easy. Let's go with a slant chord now. We'll do 2, 3, 4. The root of a slant chord is on the middle string. So in this case, I've got D at the 3rd fret on the middle string. This is a D major chord because it sounds up and happy. Now, if I just move that up, every single note, move it up just 1 fret, brings me to 3, 4, 5. Now when I play this, it doesn't sound so happy. It sounds a little depressed. That means we have a minor chord. What are we playing on the middle string? We're playing an E right there. Compare that E with the E that we just played at the 1st fret on the bass string. So it's an octave above that. So 3, 4, 5. E is the root on the middle string, and we've got our slant chord. It sounds minor. We've got an E minor chord. Compare that to this E minor 1-1-3, and then compare it to 8, 6, 5. Those are 3 different ways to play E minor already right there. So once again, the slant chord will yield major and minor chords. Occasionally, it'll also yield something that doesn't sound either major or minor. If you played a 1-2-3 chord, it's kind of a quizzical sounding chord right there. That is a dominant 7th chord, also known as simply a 7th chord. We'll be getting into that sometime here in the future, but I wanted to let you know that sometimes you'll hit a major, sometimes you'll hit a minor. Most of the time you'll hit major or minor when doing your slant shape. But every once in a while you're going to hit a weird sounding chord. And that's going to be a dominant 7th, and we'll talk about that more in the future. Okay, so from our slant chord, we can now go into our extended slant by moving the thumb up. So we go tick-tack, skip a fret, toe. In this case, I'm playing 2, 3, 5, and this is the root being on the melody string. So just to review, L-shaped chord, root is on the bass. Slant chord, root is on the middle string, which then leaves, for our extended slant, 1 more string to work with. That's going to be the melody string, and that is where our root is located. So for a 2, 3, 5 chord, at the 5th fret melody string, I'm playing B, and this sounds to me like a minor chord, so we've got ourselves a B minor. If I were to move every single one of those notes up 1 fret, I'm playing a 3, 4, 6 chord now, and my root is at C. It sounds up and happy, so we got a C major chord going on here. It's simply that easy to be able to go through. Once you know all the notes on your fretboard, and once you know those 3 chord shapes, you are good to go as long as you can tell the difference between a major chord and a minor chord. And I'm going to show you a trick here right after I explain to you about this bar chord. Because we have a 1-5-8 tuning going on here, We've got the same note on the bass string that we do on the melody string. So the bar chord, you can either use the bass string or the melody string as your root, no matter where you go. So you're going to have, I always go with the bass string because it's the lowest string in that. That's going to be your root. Now, what we're playing with a bar chord is what's called a 5 chord or root 5 chord. We already found out that a true triad chord is a root, a third, and a fifth, whether it's major or minor. If it's a major chord, it's root, and then it's a major third and a perfect fifth. If it's a minor chord, it's the root, a minor third, and a perfect fifth. But what if you take the third out of the picture all at once? If you take that third out of the picture, what you end up with is just the root and the 5, and that's what we have in DAD tuning. If we strum open, we know that chord works as D major because we've used it a whole bunch of times. But it'll also work as D minor. Why? Because we don't have a third in that picture at all. We've got D and A and another D. There's no F sharp whatsoever. There's no F natural whatsoever, which means that bar chords can be used as either major or minor chords. And that comes in handy with some of these chords that we don't have all the ingredients for, like F sharp major. We can play an F sharp minor by playing 2-2-4. The minor third is right there on the melody string, but if we take our thumb off the minor third and just play a bar across the 2nd fret, we've got the ingredients for an F sharp 5 chord, which would fit and work as both a F sharp major and an F sharp minor chord. That's good stuff to know. Keep that under your hat so you can spring it out sometime in the future, because it really will come in handy somewhere down the road. All right. Now let's get back into this. These 3 chords. I'm going to show you something else you can do with them. When you're in DAD tuning, we are in a symmetrical tuning. So anything that you do here that you flip over will remain the same chord, but it will change the voicing, as we just talked about. So let's take a look at our G major chord, 3-3-5. So just imagine that we've got 2 points, boom, boom, there at the 3rd fret where my fingers were, and then 1 point right here where my thumb was. Boom, boom, and boom. All we're going to do is we're going to flip everything over to be a mirror image. And when we flip like this, you know this note is going to end up over here, and this note is going to end up over here. The note on the middle string will not change because it's perfectly in the middle of that symmetry, which means a 3-3-5 chord can be inverted to a 5-3-3 chord. Once again, we're still playing the same 3 notes, G, B, and D, but we're changing the pitches of the notes on the bass and on the melody string. We're actually swapping them out. And you can do that with any L-shaped chord. All we're doing is just flipping those things over, and it's giving us different voicings. Now we can do the same thing with the extended slant. This is going to end up across the way on the bass string. This is going to end up across the way on the melody string. That's on the middle string. It's going to stay right where it is. In fact, I'm going to pivot on that. Watch this. Switch. Different voicing, same chord. Going to switch back, pivoting on the middle string. And same thing with the slant chord. 2-3-4, pivoting on the middle string, going to swap out the melody and bass strings, come around like this. So we just have a different voicing, we have a different sound for that chord, and sometimes you'll want that. Now, about our tuning and about inversions and how they will help us out. This is a pretty wide spectrum for 3 notes. We've got a root note, a fifth, and then the octave note. So that's a pretty wide open space there as far as how far those notes are from each other. So when we play chords like the 3, 4, 5. There's a lot of space in between all of those notes instead of the tight voicing that really helps to make these chords sing. So oftentimes if you're playing a chord and it's just not resonating with you, it's more likely because you've got what's called a first inversion. A first inversion basically takes this perfectly stacked grouping of 3 notes and yanks out the 3rd note and sticks it on the bottom. So what you get is a note with a gap, another note and another gap, and then your final note. And so it can make it difficult to discern what chords you're playing when you're using that position. So if you flip that chord over, that resonates as an E minor chord very strongly, because that right there is a second inversion. We've taken that tight cluster of notes and we've taken the 5th of the chord, the top note of the chord, and placed it on the bottom. So what we have here is a root note, some space, and then 2 notes that are cozy up next to each other, which gives us a better texture and a better voicing for recognizing the potential of the E minor chord. So just want to explain that to you. And also, one last thing. As you're using this trick to name all these chords, you're doing them in this position where the thumb is going to be the closest to the bridge. The thumb on the melody string is the closest to the bridge. If you were playing an inversion, more than likely your thumb is going to be on the bass string, which is closest to the bridge. So, take note of this because this can be kind of confusing. L-shaped chord, 3, 3, 5. Root is on the bass string, right? If we invert that chord, however, the root switches because we have moved it from the bass string to the melody string. So if you find yourself with a chord that's an L shape, but you've inverted it because you like the way it sounds, then make sure that you use this trick to name what the chord is, but that you use what finger is on the melody string as opposed to what finger is on the bass string, because that chord has been flipped over. And once again, you'll know you've inverted or flipped over that chord if the finger that's on the bass string is closest to the bridge. If the highest finger closest to the bridge is on the melody string, then you are probably playing a first inversion. If you are on the bass string, you're probably playing a second inversion. So if you have got the finger closest to the bridge on the bass string, just remember to swap out where that root was before and place it opposite. Same thing with the extended slant. If I invert this chord, the root is on the melody string right now, but if I move it to the bass string, that's where the root is now located. No longer on the melody string. If I invert it, that root is now on the bass string. And then finally, the slant chord. That slant, the root is on the middle string, so it doesn't matter what you do, it's always going to be on the middle string. Just want to make sure you have that information before you start trying to build your own chords and got a little confused by what was going on there. So we've got our notes and we know how to memorize those notes up and down the scale, and we know how to take those 3 basic chord shapes and the bar chord and how to work with that and determine, first of all, what the root is on that chord, and then also how to invert that chord to get some different flavor out of it. I think that's a good lead up to where the next episode we're going to talk about how to do some other cool stuff, how to move these chords around and how to make them sound as good as possible. So I thank you for watching. I thank you for tuning in. I thank you for being there, patrons, and I look forward to sharing the next episode with you very soon. This is Bing Futch, signing off.